Hi and welcome back to my channel. So I'm excited about this week's travel video. Now I was going to do a destination for you, but then I thought no, because something else came across my desk that I thought I would share with you. And so today we're going to be talking about TSA delays, real ID requirements. So I think a few videos back I may have shared with you all, I think I did, that TSA is now going to be requiring specific IDs for each state. So apparently some of the states have not gotten on board with what they were supposed to do. So that's just created a whole issue in and of itself. So anyone who has passed through a TSA airport checkpoint in the past years probably seen signs warning that TSA ID requirements will be changing effective January the 18th of this month. In a nutshell, some states' driver's licenses may soon no longer be valid to grant a passenger access to domestic flights. The switch is part of a regulation known as Real ID. First initiated in 2005, that mandates every state issue more secure ID cards to its residents. To qualify for the new ID, states must require residents provide a photo ID, a birth certificate or other documentation, proof of residency, social security number, and proof of address to receive a real ID compliant driver's license. In California, for example, that process will require an in-person application. So implementing the new infrastructure has been a lengthy, costly process for many states, and nearly half are not yet fully compliant with the new regulations. So which means there has been a lot of confusion among domestic travelers as to what kind of ID they will need to use by the end of January. In particular, 9 states, these are the 9 states: Kentucky, Maine, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Washington are about to become non-compliant, and their residents were being cautioned that they may be required to carry a federally issued document such as a passport in order to board domestic flights by the end of January. So on Thursday, this is last Thursday, TSA confirmed to Business Insider that the regulations were officially being pushed back to October the 11th of 2018, giving residents of non-compliant states at least an 8-month reprieve to get their flying papers in order. So according to SF Gate, there are a couple dozen states and territories that will be non-compliant by October the 11th deadline. But some of those states have already been granted an additional extension. So I'm not quite sure what those states are that have been granted the additional extension, but the states that I named, those have been pushed back to October. And what it's saying is that some of those states are still not going to be compliant. And so in those cases, residents will only be required to carry real ID compliant documentation by October of 2020. So SF Gate also cautions that just because a traveler lives in a compliant state, hear this you guys, doesn't necessarily guarantee that their driver's license qualifies for real ID. Older documentation will still need to be replaced with the newer, more secure ID cards. And I live in the state of Maryland, so I know I don't have the new ID yet. I believe I get mine, I want to say next year. Yeah, I believe I get mine next year, but I know a lot of people already have them. It's the first extension granted by the TSA and the Department of Homeland Security. In January 2016, DHS announced a 2-year delay, pushing the deadline back to January 2018. So, unfortunately, even then, they didn't realize that some people are still not going to be on board because it's a lot. It really is. Now, in other news, I want to tell you about something else. DC driver's licenses are giving TSA a hard time. So, if you live in the District of Columbia, you need to listen up. So, a Washington, D.C. delegate has called out the TSA for routinely questioning the legitimacy of D.C. licenses and ID cards. D.C. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton sent a letter to TSA Administrator David Pekulski last week, highlighting the chronic problem and detailing a recent incident in which a D.C. resident nearly missed their flight out of Newark Liberty International Airport after officers debated the validity of the ID. Now, I can't tell you much about the D.C. ID because I don't have one, so I don't know what it looks like. And so Norton wrote, as I'm sure you can imagine, it can be humiliating for a U.S. citizen to be delayed because a federal government employee does not recognize the name of the District of Columbia. Now, how in the world can you not recognize that? I don't know. She goes on to say, I therefore ask that you, like your predecessors, take action to ensure that all DC licenses and IDs in circulation continue to be included in the daily TSO briefings and to take an additional steps that can help TSOs recognize DC driver's licenses. Y'all, that should be simple enough to do. So Norton's office has been working with TSA since 2014 when the DC license was changed from Washington, D.C. to the District of Columbia. So that's the problem. It doesn't say Washington, D.C. anymore. They say District of Columbia as part of an update to meet real ID requirements. I am grateful that your predecessors implemented additional trainings for TSOs so that they could more easily recognize district licenses, but perhaps due to the turnover at the TSA, the problem persists, she wrote. The 12-year-old Real ID program mandates that states issue more secure ID cards to residents. While only about half of the states are currently compliant, it's expected that the Department of Homeland Security will continue to grant extensions as travelers without passports aren't barred from domestic travel. DC licenses aren't the only things that are giving TSA officers headaches. Officials working at airports across the U.S. failed to detect 80% of the test weapons smuggled through security checkpoints by undercover inspectors during a recent performance review. That is scary. Let me just say that is very, very scary and inexcusable. TSA agents have to do better. Now, granted, do things slip by? They probably do. But when you're talking about the officers working at airports across the U.S. failed to detect 80% of the test weapons. That's huge, you guys, and we have to do better. So those are the only updates that I have for travel this week. I wanted to make sure I let you guys know about that because that's major, and to say that if you're going to be doing any traveling this year, you need to be very careful and make sure your IDs are compliant. Okay? Again, that's all I have. I love you guys to the moon and back, and I want to say thank you so much to my new subscribers. Thank you so much to those of you that continue to support me in all that I do. I love you guys to the moon and back, and you know I mean it because I don't use that term loosely. So until next week, when we talk about more travel related stuff, I want you to take care, have a great week, and we'll talk again soon.